pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll have roll call.
Councilmember Vaughn.
Here.
Councilmember Schimmel.
Here.
Councilmember Williams.
Present.
Councilmember Strobin.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Servany.
Here. Thank you. And a wonderful hearty welcome to our new council member, Tom Strobin. You want to take a few minutes to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I guess.
We'll
2
put
weeks
you
ago,
on-
I was doing
we'll
that too.
put you on the
right?
spot
Put me
right
on the
now,
spot.
okay?
I've lived in the community for about 12, 13 years. I've had a wife and 2 kids, and one of the main reasons I really wanted to be up here was to help make the city continue the progress I've seen in the last 12 to 13 years. So hopefully I can live up to the expectations and make the right decisions.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
We'll move into the consent agenda. If there are no requests for items to be removed, may I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried. Council staff reports and announcements. Mayor's report. The mayor will be out of town for the October 3rd scheduled Mayor's Town Hall. So that has been canceled. And we'll go to attorney's report next.
I have a couple of short items. We had our scheduling hearing before the Superior Court judge last week. This is in the Riverside Estates appeal. We had hoped that it would settle before now, and I think it will settle. It's just that the 2 lawyers involved have been preoccupied and busy with other things, and so we have come to basic deal point terms that we could agree to. What's left is specific language for a settlement agreement for the mechanism by which this will happen. The deal points and the language for a settlement agreement have been hashed out. So it's good to have this scheduling hearing before the judge. It kind of focuses everybody's attention and sets a schedule by which this thing must be settled, or it heads on into motions and briefing and on and on. So the way it's set up is it won't go to briefing until close to the end of the year. The briefing on the merits won't happen until the beginning of next year because the parties want time to file motions to dismiss. So Naomi has put together the record. I've looked at the table of contents today, so that's ready to go. And we have set a settlement meeting among us lawyers, plus also the 2 primary combatants, the Dennis Nutbrock, who represents his neighborhood association for the petitioners, and Kevin Engelstad, the developer, will be at this meeting too. So neither of them was at the hearing before the judge, which is sort of unfortunate because people tend to get focused and motivated to settle when someone in a black robe yells at them. So unfortunately it didn't happen. He was all too polite and nice to us lawyers, but I would like to see him slap the clients around a little bit. So hopefully this will get settled, and I'll have something to bring back to the City Council after this meeting next Tuesday. And maybe we can get together afterward and I can explain the background on this appeal.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. All these land use appeals have, in many cases, a history that goes back years. So the other appeal that we have pending is the appeal of the county's GMA update from 2 years ago that expanded our urban growth area at the junction a bit. It was already at the junction before that. This expanded it by about 53 acres. I conveyed to you the briefs that were filed by petitioners. What has been filed recently is the respondents, the FutureWise's consolidated brief. I can send it to you if you'd like. It's 94 pages long. I'll send it out. And we have a reply brief opportunity that's due middle of October, I think the 17th of October. And so Sarah Mack is formulating that. I'm reviewing the response brief from FutureWise, and we'll communicate with her on some of the issues that should be addressed. She's well aware of the key issues that matter to us, the primary one being, does the Growth Board have authority to issue an order and remedy for land that's already been annexed into a city? Because clearly the county no longer has any authority under state law to address any of that 53 acres that was part of our urban growth area, because it was annexed before it was heard by the Growth Board. The Growth Board doesn't have authority to craft a remedy of any sort. There's a lot of case law that says appeals challenging land that was annexed. In this context, those kind of appeals are moot because there's no remedy can be granted. That's our issue, our argument before the Court of Appeals. So I'll send out the FutureWise's brief. It's a PDF of some size, and we will have a draft of the city's reply brief to you by mid-October. And other than that, the latecomer agreement issues notes are on tonight's agenda. Anything else? Any of you have questions about? Okay.
Thank you, Dan. All right. To extend to council comments, Councilmember Boff.
Thank you, Mayor. And good evening to everyone. Don't have much to say other than just this afternoon I had a comment from a citizen that I just wanted to share. The citizen commented to me that the Buc-ee's property is starting to look a little ragged over there, and the weeds are starting to pop out of the driveway or the parking lot. So I don't know if you would consider it a nuisance yet, but I think we need to keep an eye on that because it is starting to look a little bit of an eyesore up there. Okay. Otherwise, I have nothing else. Okay.
Somebody was in the Buc-ee's building today, doing some kind of work there. Door was open.
We'll follow up on it. Councilmember Stimmel.
Yeah, just one thing. There was a comment on social media, I think from a school bus driver, about somebody blowing past the bus with the stop sign out, and I just kind of wanted to refresh everyone's memory. There's pressure for us parents. You probably got the letter too, to use the buses. There's pressure from the city for us to use the buses. There's problems with the buses we don't have to get into, but I can tell you one thing as a parent. If we don't trust the citizens to drive safe around our kids, then we won't trust the school buses, because I can tell you my little boys, they won't look both ways. I don't know about yours, they look a little smaller than mine.
Yeah, no.
I'd love it if they could remember stuff like that, but when they see something shiny, they just tend to run. And so that was kind of a concerning comment. There's a whole string of comments now, I'm sure. But just a reminder, in those mornings and in the afternoons around 3, not a good time to be in a hurry. So we have to kind of work together to keep the traffic down at 8 o'clock in the morning and 3 in the afternoon, because if parents don't feel safe, they're going to keep driving. I know my wife will.
Definitely.
That's all I had tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. That's important. Councilmember Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. Noticed that the end of 25 zone speed limit sign went up at the end of the bridge. That's good. Hopefully people understand that the bridge is in the land of 25 and not 50 or someplace in between. So again, just be careful when we're going through town. The other thing too, Mayor, the next meeting, October the 10th, is questionable whether I will be back in time. I have an activity out on the coast that day, and I'm not sure what time it'll get done. I'll have to drive back, so I may or may not be at the October 10th meeting. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Now, Councilmember Strobin.
I think I'm good tonight, actually.
Okay.
Thank you.
And my turn. I would just like to thank everyone for being here this evening. And I would also like to thank the staff for Monday evening's workshop. I think it went very well. They were very patient answering all of the questions that were brought forward to them. And it was just very impressive. So thank you very much for that. So that takes us into staff reports, and first up is a finance report from consultant Paul Lewis.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Tonight, just got a brief staff report from the Finance Department. Just a couple things to hit on. Give you an update on the financial results through August 2018. Gambling taxes so far this year coming through in at $838,000, excluding the December 2017 payment that came in January. So it's roughly 63% of the revised estimate that we had through 67% of the year. If you recall, the agreement with the card room owners had a 5% tax rate, extended, revenue base for a 5% tax rate for April, or May, June, and July. It expired in July, and so that's why the revenues appear to be a little bit down. Still believe we'll be on track. If the fourth quarter comes in anything like the first quarter, we should be on track to meet our revised estimate by the end of the year. Utility excise taxes through August were approximately $103,600. That excludes the cable TV tax revenue that we're tracking. If you recall, we've received an inordinate amount of money from Comcast, $195,000. And it actually is a payment based on the telephone tax, not the cable TV tax. I was able to have a conversation and email exchange with their state and local government tax manager back in Philadelphia, and he indicated that they're aware of the overpayment and would be sending us a revised set of remittances for both the telephone and the cable TV. Although I haven't heard from him, he said he was going to get it to me within a week, and it's been 2.5 weeks. So we're still waiting to hear from them and follow up. Sales taxes, a bright note for year-to-date. Sales taxes are running well ahead of budget for the year, 77% through 67% of the year, $214,000. My guess is we'll be well in excess of $300,000 for the full year. And a lot of this, I believe, is due to development activity, housing development specifically. Charges for service related to that, up at 125% of the budget. That includes a $15,000 deposit on future development. New permits through yesterday, I think, are 43 permits, exceeding the 40 that we had budgeted for the year, and I think still on track for potential 58 for the full year. So development continues in the subdivisions, the new subdivisions that the city has available. Total revenue, right on pace, so 67% of total revenue. If you exclude the one-time revenue, that includes the Comcast payments as well as the $100,000 donation from the Cowlitz tribe for police. We pull those out, look at the actual revenues through August, and we're right at the 67% mark. Similarly, on the expense side, right where we should be at 67%, even with the front loading of a lot of those expenses. If you recall, earlier reports, we indicate that the insurance payments and several of the CRESA payments, a number of payments the city makes for an annual basis take place in the first quarter. So we're right on track on the expense side for the general fund. And the sewer side also doing well. Revenues are at 69% of the budgeted amount. Expenses, excluding transfers, are right on budget at 67%. That 42% should be 67. Apologize for that. Junction sewer lines completed. Sewer system development charge was updated in July. So other quick items. We'll have a full third quarter financial report for you next month. And the Budget Advisory Committee meeting has been meeting. They met earlier this month on the 13th, and they're meeting again tomorrow night to review the preliminary budget, which will be coming to you in October. So, any questions about the finance report? Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
It takes us to Human Resources report, our consultant, Janice Corbin.
Mayor Pro Tem, council members, community members. I always feel bad that I'm talking away from them. A couple of pieces. One, the finance manager position. We are very close to filling that position. We ultimately ended up with well over 90 candidates. So that was good. About a fourth of them didn't have even close to relevant experience. We did phone interviews with 13 of them. We interviewed 7 of them and narrowed it down to a candidate. That candidate's name is Dustin Bailey. He has interviewed with all of the managers, including the chief. Mayor Pro Tem interviewed him. Paul Lewis was part of the interview in the initial ones. He comes to us with an MBA degree. He also has well over 15 or 16 years of government experience, which includes both county government experience and federal government experience. Currently works for the feds in their transportation unit and bureau. He is very bright and capable, has a sense of humor, that's all good, and he's a La Center resident.
Rah, rah.
So one of the reasons he applied for the job is that he wants to contribute to his community, and he wants to be involved with his children. And not working for the feds will give him a chance to do that. I think he's going to bring a really strong, fresh of breath air. He's very savvy with software and also with processes, and we are looking at doing a lean assessment, and he has experience with that. So I think he's going to bring a real plus. He's very professional in his delivery, I think you would agree, but also very approachable. So we're ready to do with that. We're finishing up the contract, the employment contract, all the details on that, and we're finishing up. I have done all of his reference checks, and so everyone speaks highly of him and his former employers and say, well, if he doesn't stay, we'll take him back. And it's like, well, we would like to have him for a while anyway. So I think we'll move forward with that, and I think he'll be a real asset. The next one is Community Development Director. We've been to this table before. We came back. We have a different job description with greater clarity. All the council members have reviewed and given input. The employees have given input. The mayor, we've asked other professionals. So we're going to roll that out tomorrow, and it'll be posted for over 3 weeks. Interesting enough, one of the websites that did the best for our job search was Indeed. We got more hits from Indeed and in all the other systems that we advertise the finance manager, including all the government websites. So we're going to do something similar, and also the business pieces of it. We're looking at hopefully having candidates doing interviews late October and then November, maybe sometime in the middle as a start date. Back to the finance manager, we're hoping a start date maybe the 3rd week of October. We want him to be able to give notice to his employer. We don't want to make the feds mad. So we're going to negotiate with them a little bit before we do that. So the community development goes out. I'm kind of excited about that. I think it's stronger this time. I think we've done a lot of behind the scenes networking to get the word out. I know the staff has too, so we're excited about that one. The mayor has identified 3 primary goals for all employees that went out today. Those goals are continue to be fiscally wise so that we're fiscally sustainable. Number 2 goal was look for efficiencies and effectiveness. We've been talking about it inside the city for weeks. We're now beginning to look at job descriptions, line workup, looking for redundancies. The staff has been they've actually been very supportive of the process because I don't believe it's going to affect jobs at all. We're just going to try to make time for some of the other work we'd like to do. To that end, we looked at our Public Works Manager's position. It's now a manager, not a director title, a manager position. We are going to combine the Public Works Manager and the Wastewater Supervisor. And that position will be 50% for Public Works and 50% for Waste Management, and have oversight for both of those. It doesn't change the structure of the staffing for Public Works. It just changes the management role in that sense. And we've asked the Department of Ecology if we can do this, if they'll approve that, and they have. So they're comfortable with our equipment, with our staffing. It will change our staffing a little bit. We currently have an Operator 1 and an Operator 3 position. We'll make both of those positions now Operator 3s. Primarily because when you have an Operator 1, they cannot operate the plant alone. So it's not efficient for us to operate with a 1. We will end up with the 2. So we already have one employee, Bill Birdwell, who is a 2/3. He has his 2 certification, but he's testing for his 3, and we will be looking for another 3 to fill that other position. And that will constitute a layoff for one of the employees. So the union's been told, the employee has been told, so that they'll have plenty of time. He's a wastewater operator 1. I do not believe there'll be any difficulty in that person finding a job. We know, for example, Camas is looking for somebody, Washougal, and so forth and so on. So we've already given the heads up. The unions are working with us collaboratively, which I really appreciate. They understand that we need to work efficiently and effectively, plus we combine that management position. The former manager position oversaw the planning, the engineer, and all of that. That now goes to the community development director. So the span of control will be different, and thus that's part of the reason for doing that. Questions? Okay, so again, back to the efficiency. Labor relations, I met with the police union today. It was actually a very productive meeting. We met for a couple of hours, and we agreed that we would do interest-based bargaining as a form of negotiating with contracts for unions. Not quite interest-based bargaining, but we're trying to be on the same page with each other. So it's kind of that. I mean, one of the things we want to do is look at reducing overtime, look at reducing the comp time for 2 reasons. 1, the cost, and 2nd, the wear and tear. We're going to be up to snuff now. We're going to be fully staffed, and I think that's going to help a lot. And then we talked about some language changes. Salaries we haven't quite gotten to yet. I think that'll be a little bit contentious. And I think insurance, which we've said all along, we've asked for going from a 5%, which is what the officers pay right now for dependent. We've asked them to go to 25. So the split would be 75-25 for the dependents, 100% still for the employee. And we've only met one time with the civilian unions, but we've met regularly to talk with them. We're making some progress. I don't think this is going to be incredibly difficult, but I don't want to jinx it either, because money's money, and that's hard for people to have to give up something that they've had. And we're also working on job descriptions, although slower than I would like, only because of availability of time and people not being able to meet, and so there's no negative to it, it's just slower than I would like. So other than that, that's what I have to report. Any questions from any council members?
Sounds like you're very busy.
We are busy. It's a we. It's not just me, it's a we, because it involves all the employees as well. And I have to say, I'm really happy that the employees are willing to bend a little bit and work with us and looking for solutions. So, okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, community development report for Naomi, our associate planner, presenting.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, citizens. We've had a lot of progress recently. We had a public hearing for the Stevens Hillside subdivision, 85 lots, single detached future homes for our community on the north side of the Heritage Trail in the north of Foothill Estates. That was well attended and generally a very positive public hearing. We'll have a report from the hearing examiner probably in the next week. Heritage Country Estates continues to go like gangbusters. I'll have them picking up 4 more approved plans tomorrow morning. Riverside Estates continues with their mass grading. That seems to be going okay. We have the school district is still working on the Bullen annexation, and we have annexation coming forward for what we're calling the Holly annexation. It's going to be south of Holly Park. And finally, the Latecomers open house was a success, very well attended, and like it was mentioned before, staff and consultants did a great job answering everyone's questions. Any questions? All right.
Thank you, Naomi.
Thanks.
That takes us into citizens' public comment this evening. And just a reminder, this time is allotted for citizens making public comment on items that aren't already on the agenda. If you have a comment, please step forward and provide us with your name, address, and comments are limited to 3 minutes. So thank you. Come on up.
Al Fella, 152 West 15th Street. I just want to remind everybody, it's coming up October. American Legion Post 189 has their annual flag disposal ceremony, and we're looking for flags, you know. And so if you have any, you know, you can look up myself or Larry or Andy or Jim Irish, or you can drop them off here at City Hall, you know, and hopefully we won't get washed out. We've had a 2-year washout, but okay, thank you.
Thank you,
I
Al.
have a question for you.
Oh.
What was the date again on that?
October 11th.
October 11th. Okay, and I have a flag for you, by the way.
Okay, well, you know where I live.
I do. Thank you.
Can that be added to our website? Thanks. Next. Don't be shy. All right. No presentation scheduled. I won't get on the table and dance. Laughter here. Lightheartedness. Takes us to ordinances, resolutions, and public hearings. And our first step is ordinance 2018-14, repealing and replacing La Center Municipal Code Section 5.05 to implement new state requirements regarding business licenses. So we have consultant Paul Lewis back up again.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, council, citizens. Been a tag team with City Attorney Dan Kearns on this one. In 2017, the legislature passed a new law to help standardize business licensing across the state at the local level. One of the things they did is they formed a task force of local government representatives and asked them to come up with a model ordinance addressing business licensing in general, but specifically focused on 2 areas. One is to come up with a common definition of engaging in business, and then the second was to address out-of-city businesses that are licensed within a city and provide a revenue threshold that cities that would not require licensing or the payment of a license fee under a certain threshold for businesses that just come into the city on a minimal basis. The task force met, they came up with a model ordinance, and the legislation essentially required adoption by the end of this year at the local government level. So every city across the state, there's over 200 of them with business licenses, are going through the same process you're going through now. They're essentially amending their ordinances. They were effective 2 dates that had to be adopted by. Let me back up. The legislation had a third element, and that was requiring cities to use one of 2 centralized business licensing systems. And they provided deadlines for that of 2021. They're essentially 2 licensing systems that cities use right now. The most prominent one is used by, I think, 70 or so mid-sized cities. It's run by the Department of Revenue Bureau Licensing Services, and it works pretty well. You can go on to when you renew your state business license, another reminder comes up that says you're licensed in these cities, and you can just click a button and apply for your license in those cities as well. So it centralizes that function. It's really convenient for businesses that work in multiple cities. The other is a file local system. It's used primarily by the Puget Sound cities that have a B&O tax, and it simplifies filing and reporting for businesses in the Puget Sound that do business in multiple jurisdictions. But that's expandable, and so that's another business licensing system that the state has authorized local governments to use. And the requirement was to use one of those 2 systems by the end of 2021. You don't currently use the business licensing service, but you will be required to convert there over the next year or 2. So the ordinance 2018-14 essentially repeals and replaces your business license code, but primarily just implements 2 primary features. Just hit on those real quickly. One is the definition of engaging in business. So this section 3 looks like a pretty small paragraph here, but you can see it has a lot of exceptions, definitions, sub-definitions, and this is a standardized definition that all cities are required to adopt. And then the other element is an exception, so this 5.05.0402, and it requires, it provides an exception for business conducted within the city that is equal to or less than $2,000 per year, and they don't maintain a physical place of business in the city. They still have to license, but they do not have to pay the annual fee. Those are the primary substantive changes that ordinance 2018-14 implements. I'll defer to Dan to see if he has any other comments on this.
You might notice that this is kind of a complete overhaul of the city's business license program. We adopted our ordinance in 1985, and so it hasn't really been updated since then. And when the legislature passed ESHB 2005 back in the last year's legislative session, they set up this advisory committee and came up with basically a whole new model code. It didn't really fit super exactly how the center does it. So this, what you see here, is the centerized version of the model ordinance, but it includes the critical elements that must be included in order to integrate with the state program. And the state program, I don't have any, none of my clients work with it. Paul has some that do, and it kind of reflects the modern age of businesses that are based in other states that want to conduct business either through the internet or, I suppose, in person in states around the country. And this facilitates their ability to comply with the thousands of jurisdictions' business licensing requirements. You can see in the modern age it would be a big impediment if you had to go to each and every city in Washington and get a business license. It's kind of one-stop shopping for those out-of-state companies.
And I will say, just that for several of my clients that have made the conversion over the last couple of years, they've seen a little bit of an increase in revenue when that happens just because of the standardization. The businesses are required to get their state business license every year, so if they're reminded about the city businesses licenses of cities that they work in or are likely to work in, they can just click a button and add that to their business licensing.
Add to cart.
Yes, add to cart.
It makes it easier to pay and register, so you'll see a lot more compliance.
And in this day and age, there are a lot of businesses, especially when you get into the larger construction businesses and
Correct.
that also have or actually hire out the management of their bookkeeping, and so a lot of the payments are done outside of the business itself. So it does become more fruitful and efficient for those particular situations as well. So I can see where the increase in revenue would come from in those scenarios.
Yeah, and we see it a lot of times struggling with if you have a transient room tax, internet-based booking agencies like Airbnb is a good example of how this works routinely in terms of business practices within jurisdictions, and how do you track that kind of business. And this makes those, it doesn't really address transient room tax, but it makes business operations much more straightforward. Understand we had a 1985 version. We do right now. This is what's replacing it.
So this is an ordinance. It does require a public hearing. Staff's recommendation is that you pass the ordinance, subject to the public comment.
All right. Thank you, Paul.
Is there, I have a question, Paul. Is there, with the state system, the one you mentioned, the non-Puget Sound system, is there a tie-in to L&I to ensure that the business has their workers' comp insurance?
No, there isn't directly through that licensing system, but through the state's business licensing system, I believe that there's a number of reports that you have to, you're made aware of in terms of their portal, their business licensing portal. So that while there's not a direct connection through this business licensing system, the state does afford other links in their system between the L&I and the business licensing.
That's good. I had a contractor in my house. He had a business license in the center. L&I wasn't up to date, so we had to stop him and get him off the job till he fixed it. So I just want to protect the consumer.
There are websites that you can go and check their status, so consumer beware. But.
Yep. Great. Thank you.
That raises a good point that a lot of my city clients, the commissioners and councilors will ask that question. understand that business licenses are almost nearly universally just revenue raising. They're not a regulatory mechanism because, and some cities sort of creep into that a little bit. It's rare, but you see that. The problem with that is either you're in for a little bit and it doesn't work, or you're into it totally. And so unless the city is going to undertake, a regulatory review of all business conducted in the city, make sure that the 30,000 regulatory requirements are met, I don't recommend you do it. Because we are not in a position to determine if any company meets L&I.
Well, no, I just was asking if there was a automatic tie-in.
They're at least advised of additional requirements, but, it's purely revenue raising on the local level, not regulatory. And the only time recently I've seen it inch out of that is in marijuana businesses, where the cities will say, well, we're not going to issue a business license because the sale and use of marijuana still violates federal law.
It also generates the requirement. I mean, this is solely based on the city. So I agree with Dan, because I have city clients from north to south and east to west, and if they have a savvy group in the finance, then they're on it. But if not, you never see it. So it kind of depends. I mean, I have business licenses all over the state with all different cities, including this one, but not always is that the case. It depends on the savviness of the individual city, and workers' comp is not, or L&I is not generated from that piece for the most part. Because not all businesses, depending on what they do, have to have L&I, one. And number two, if you don't, then you have to be able to prove liability and general liability. So, and that I have, but I don't have L&I.
The way the state system works is that once someone applies for a city business license, it is referred to the local level before it's approved. So there is a sort of a gatekeeping function. Most of the cities that use the system look for in-home businesses, so there's this home occupancy thing that most cities are concerned with, and to the extent that there are any fire issues about the type of business, so if it's uses harsh chemicals or something, there may be a call to the fire marshal to make sure that the business is meeting other regulations. So there is a sort of a gatekeeping function that the city has. For the most part, it's perfunctory, but there is an opportunity for them to review the license before they approve it. So, but that's not what you're into yet, but you will be. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Paul. We'll open it up for public comment. No. All right. We will entertain a motion.
I move to approve ordinance 2018-14, repealing and replacing La Center Municipal Code, Chapter 5.05.
Second.
Okay. Do we need to do roll call?
Councilmember Ball?
Yes.
Councilmember Stimmel?
Yes.
Councilmember Williams?
Yes.
Councilmember Strobin?
Yes.
Councilmember Servin?
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Takes us into ordinance 2018-15, amending La Center Municipal Code, Section 13.10.240, latecomers agreements. And once again, Paul Russ.
Thank you again. Ordinance 2018-15 is a simple amendment to your municipal code section 13.10.240. It extends the term allowed for latecomer agreements from 15 to 20 years. The state statute originally started at 15 years. It was changed to 20 years. Your code just missed that update, so this makes your code compliant with the RCW that governs latecomer agreements at the state level. This adds flexibility for the local jurisdiction. Your ordinance matches state law, and it allows for terms up to 20 years. So in specific instances, you can have terms that are less than 20 years. 20 years, in my experience, has been the standard, though, for these agreements in other jurisdictions. We are asking you to pass this ordinance on an emergency basis, requiring a majority +1. The emergency ordinance allows the ordinance to be in effect immediately. Later on your agenda tonight, you'll be considering a latecomer agreement with a 20-year term. And that's the reason for the emergency clause. And we'll make it effective immediately. This is, again, an ordinance, requires a public hearing, and staff's recommendation is it's subject to the public comment. You approve the ordinance.
Okay.
I have a question for you, Renee. At the open house on Monday night, I heard one or two questions or comments questioning the wisdom of going from 15 to 20. Is there any downside with staying at 15 as opposed to 20?
I think there's a couple things at play. One is that the negotiations with the tribe and the latecomer agreement that you'll be considering later have always been based on a 20-year term. So that's sort of one argument that I would make. Another would be that large improvements, like the ones that the Cowlitz have made, require development, a large amount of development to repay their costs. And that development typically takes a longer period of time. So the longer period of time provides essentially more effective ways to reimburse the property owner and developers for infrastructure that they've built that benefits a larger set of properties and requires development over a longer time frame.
Okay.
So I think that, again, oftentimes you see large latecomer agreements, they have a longer term, and the latecomer agreement language itself, the developer's only entitled to their costs. So once the costs are reached, the latecomer agreement effectively expires at that point anyways. So the longer term just allows them, doesn't allow them to get any more than their costs, it just allows them to recoup their costs, and to the extent that that takes a longer period of time, it gives them that flexibility. And the other, I think you mentioned earlier, the downside for the city, I think, is just the flexibility to have that as an option, going to 20 years and matching the state requirements. And I do want to mention, I know at your seat there was some correspondence from Mr. Jeremy Smith that you all have seen. I'll just summarize the comments that he provided. He was recommending that you oppose the term increase from 15 to 20 years. The main point that he makes there is that it's just to the tribe's benefit and not to the city's benefit, and that was his point there. He makes another argument about the possibility for an extension to the latecomer agreement, which is a subject later, but since I'm covering his correspondence right now, the RCW does provide for extension to the term of a latecomer agreement, but it's only in the event that something were to happen to restrict development within the benefiting area. For example, if there was a moratorium for concurrency reasons or water availability or other reasons that lasted longer than 6 months, then the holder of the latecomer agreement could apply for an extension of the term to match whatever the moratorium was, to essentially give them the same length of potential term for development in the benefiting area.
Who would make that determination if they applied for that?
It would come to council for,
Yeah, development moratoria are things that councils adopt by ordinance. If that's what you mean.
Yeah.
and it would be brought up as an issue for the latecomer agreement.
Yeah, there'd be legal impediments to development in that entire area that is benefited by the sewer line. So they would be precluded from actually using the sewer line.
So we would cause it, and then
It would be something we would cause, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And Paul, as you mentioned in other comments, there are other large projects, such as the city of Camas with the city school, that are very similar in nature to this as far as the latecomer agreements, and for that 20-year period.
Correct. Typically, again, the 20-year period for larger projects, and as you mentioned, the the Camas School District in the city of Camas just recently entered into, earlier this year, entered into a latecomer agreement that provided a 20-year term for the school district. Okay, again, it's an ordinance, an emergency ordinance, subject to the public comment. Staff's recommendation is that you approve the ordinance.
Okay.
I have a couple of comments as well, by way of staff comments, kind of getting to this issue of do you have to do it, is it, and the issues, concerns raised by Mr. Smith, who's on the Planning Commission, so he has some understanding of how planning works. The latecomer agreement that's going to come before you, as well as the latecomer, this amendment to our latecomer provision in the code, is here because of an intergovernmental agreement that the city executed 2 years ago with the Cowlitz tribe over the transportation, basically the transportation improvements that were dictated by the interchange redevelopment. If you'll recall, they replaced the overpass and totally reconfigured the roads and streets on both sides, and there was a very complicated series of swaps, basically, of pieces of right-of-way and access, and if you remember, there were like 30-some-odd snippets of right-of-way. The concurrence for all of those rights-of-way was required by WashDOT, so that they imposed on the tribe, look, you've got to work with the local government on these transportation improvements that you have to do as part of the upgrade of and replacement of the interchange. In that agreement, the city added, oh, by the way, the tribe will construct a sewer line. So it was ostensibly a transportation agreement, interlocal agreement, but the city asked in exchange for agreeing to these transportation improvements that the tribe will pay for the construction of a sewer line from the plant out to the junction. And it stems back to the early days of when the city engaged the tribe, when there was a chance that the tribe would actually use that sewer line. As you know, it's stubbed to the other side of the freeway, and the tribe is not connected to it, and their position is they have no plans to connect to it. They have their own plant. And so, also a part of this intergovernmental agreement, in addition to the tribe's agreement to pay for the construction of the sewer line, is that the city would adopt a mechanism by which properties that would be benefited by this sewer line would pay a fee to reimburse the tribe for its costs. The way the financing is structured is this sewer line was constructed by the city as a public works project. So it went through full public bidding, and we financed this public works project through the issuance of municipal bonds. And in the contract with the tribe is paying the principal and interest on those municipal bonds, as well as the financing and administrative costs of the bond issue. So that's how the tribe is fulfilling its obligation in the interlocal agreement. And understand that if you look at the latecomer agreement and what will be reimbursed is the cost of constructing the line. It doesn't include the bond financing costs, the interest costs, the administrative costs. So those the tribe is eating, and they're hoping to get reimbursement for just the construction costs, that basically what the city paid, and it's $4
Actually,
million.
yeah, the latecomer agreement actually provides for reimbursement of the total cost, so it does include the other costs. There's another provision in state law, the assessment district, that does not provide. So the costs associated with the project include the design, the engineering, city's project management costs, the financing costs as well, construction financing costs, but the financing costs up until the project was completed, so July 30th. I think in the presentation from last week, we identified what those costs were, and I'm happy we can bring that up for you later when you're considering the agreement and show you the exact costs.
But the up-to-date last invoice we have, that's the basis for the reimbursement, is in, even though the bonds won't be paid off until 2020, so
2020. June 30th, 2020.
Yeah. So the total cost, the last invoice comes in at $4,256,507.99. So that's the fulfillment, the latecomers agreement is the fulfillment of the city's obligation under that interlocal agreement. And there's nothing in, the interlocal agreement is no more detailed than that. It doesn't even specify that it would be a latecomers agreement. It could have been a reimbursement district under a different statute, or it could have been an enhanced systems development charge or impact fee for this region. And so when I've worked on similar reimbursement districts where a developer, one or more developers pay to put in a piece of infrastructure that has capacity beyond what they'll use, which is the case here since the tribe won't be using this at all, that generally it's in an urban area where there's development around, and it's clear where the development will happen and when and how many units. And so that's how you calculate the reimbursement, and it's pretty predictable when and how that development will happen. This case is a little different because as you go through there, through that part of the city, those are all within the city limits, but it looks distinctly rural. All the people who live there and the development you see was approved under county zoning. I don't know that we haven't approved any urban development in that part of the city. And the requirement in order to have urban development, either urban types or urban densities, is that there be public sewer. So you won't see that land develop without public sewer, at least not developed to urban densities. So that's kind of the genesis of this latecomer agreement and the 15 versus 20 year period. When we first adopted this latecomer provision in the code, it was prior to, I think it was 2014 when the time period was increased in state law from 15 to 20 years. And it was put in years ago as we were negotiating this with the tribe, when the tribe would actually be a customer. And since then, the prospect of them being a customer is now evaporated.
Questions?
Yeah, prior to becoming a potential customer, was it always discussed that they'd get repayment? So if they became a customer, we were still going to do a latecomer agreement or some sort of form of repayment?
To the extent that there was overcapacity. So and one question that came up in, I don't know if it was testimony at the last hearing, I think it was in the open house. Well, what if for some reason the tribe decides to turn off its sewage treatment plant and hook up to the city? This line is stubbed right to the other side of the freeway. If that were to happen, that would be an amendment to this district, and it would cause a complete recalculation of benefit.
I should say more directly, the intergovernmental agreement actually does, Section 3 talks about the city in consultation with the tribe shall implement either a latecomer fee program or system development charges for properties that connect to the extended sewer system. So it was contemplated specifically in that March 2016 agreement, which I think was negotiated for some time before that date. So it was specifically provided for.
So if the tribe were to hook up, there would still be some overcapacity in the line that's been constructed. It wouldn't be nearly as much as there is now. It's basically 100% of the line is beyond, is more than what the tribe needs, because the tribe needs zero. If the tribe were to hook up, the increment of overcapacity would be a lot, would be less than the total sewer line, because the tribe would be using it. And so they should have to pay for that. I mean, you see the way the costs are allocated, the properties at the junction are at the very end, and so the presumption is that all the properties at the junction that might develop and hook up would use the entire line and the pump station. So they would pay an increment of the entire cost. If the casino or some tribal development were to hook up, that would presumably also use the whole infrastructure and would compel a complete recalculation of it.
But aren't the calculations also incorporated into the type of development and
Right.
ERU usage?
So, and again, this ordinance that you're focused on right now is just, changing your code for any latecomer agreement that would do from 15 to 20 years up to. So it still provides you the flexibility to go less than 20 years. And then the item later on your agenda is the specific latecomer agreement, and sure there'll be more discussion on that when you get there, so.
But given the rural nature of that land and the problems of actually developing to urban densities and types, it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen
It's a
anytime
longer-term
soon.
prospect.
I dare say it won't happen in 15 years. And so the city, basically, it's more likely that the tribe will recover some reimbursement if it's extended to the full length of 20 than 15. The other reimbursement districts I've worked on have been in urban areas that are going to develop within a year or two. And it's known those developments have been submitted for land use application. This one, I have no idea when these lands will develop. Even the junction is a big question mark.
None of us know. No, thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
In the unlikely event that we do see development within the next 15 or 20 years, and those fees are collected, then the tribe decides to connect, is there any recourse to those developers who paid those fees? Or is it a sunk cost?
I don't know the answer to that. I've never seen that situation come up.
Yeah, I think
That's-
the agreement calls for reimbursement of the tribe for benefiting property owners.
At the time of hookup, and if there's a change to the basically this latecomer area, the zone of benefit, then that would cause an amendment to the latecomer agreement. But until that happens, there won't be a recalculation. And how you retroactively remedy that or reimburse developments that have already come through, I don't know.
And the same would be true for any private development if it happened after 20 years, or if you annexed an area after 20 years and they used the system, essentially the property owners that paid earlier on wouldn't see any benefit from that.
Yeah, after 20 years, this turns into a pumpkin.
So there would be no litigation or any lawsuits after that, or forcing the city to?
Never say never about that question.
Lawsuits. We have no control over that part. All right. Any more questions from council? Thank you, Paul. All right, we will open it up for further public comment at this point.
Okay, I was at the meeting Monday. I presented.
Introduce yourself first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Larry Luden, 1109 West C Avenue. Council, staff members. I presented a hypothetical question to the folks. I said, given our sewer system, given the tribe's injection system, which system is likely to fail first? Guess which was voted? The injection system. So, my gut feeling is, and it may be 10, it may be 15, it may be 20 years, the state is going to tell the tribe that that system no longer can be used and they have no choice but to hook up. Now, my feeling is the tribe doesn't really like the center. I mean, there seems to be these little cat fights going on all the time. So I talked to the guys at the wastewater treatment plant and I said, if they choose not to hook up with us, what's their alternative? It's to hook up and try to go to Richfield, which the transfer station is 2 miles down the road, and then it will be sent to Salmon Creek for processing. That is going to be really expensive. My gut feeling tells me that the tribe eventually is going to have to hook up to our system. What I want to know is, are they going to do a song and dance and say, we've already paid for it, we're not going to pay you for the service? I'm sorry, but, I'm worried if they have to hook up, they're going to try to figure out a way not to hook up, or if it's 20 years, they're going to want to pay today's prices. So, I don't know, I don't have the answer, but that's what's coming. And I just think the technology, that system is going to have to be replaced. And I think that it's going to be, if it's not the feds, it'll be the state. I don't think it's the county has that much clout, but when I talk to them, and it's interesting, I don't think, we were always told at the beginning that even if the tribe hooks up, we won't max that system out. We'll be at 50%, but now I'm hearing, well, we could be at 100% just if the tribe hooks up. I don't think so. So, anyway, that's my 2 cents worth, folks. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Larry. Next.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. For the record, my name is Steve Hornstein, 500 Broadway, Suite 120 in Vancouver. I'm here on behalf of the Cowlitz Indian Tribe and the Cowlitz Tribal Gaming Authority. Let me correct a couple of things that you've heard tonight, for starters. Number one, the reason the tribe couldn't hook up as badly as we wanted to the LaCentre system, which is a modular system with plenty of ability to create capacity, is that we lost a lawsuit about it. It was deemed that doing so would violate the Growth Management Act. The city, through Sarah Mack primarily, and I litigated that case, and much to our surprise, we lost. And the reason we lost is because of two fundamental goals in the Growth Management Act. First one says you provide urban services and you urbanize and densify the urban area, and you keep the rural area rural. In Clark County, the tribe is outside your urban growth boundary. It's not in Richfield's urban growth boundary. So under state law, it's still rural. So there is no feasible way that we'll ever connect to that tribe absent to that sewer line, absent modifications to the Growth Management Act that would completely upend its two fundamental goals. Ain't going to happen. So the tribe built a very state-of-the-art, impressive wastewater treatment facility that I understand, and I've asked the question, can serve not only the existing development there, but the hotel and some future development on that site. That's also somewhat modular. It can be expanded. If you haven't had the tour, it's quite fascinating, and I would recommend that you do that. It's an impressive facility. The state doesn't have any control over a sovereign nation and its sewer problems. The federal government doesn't have any control over sewer problems, although it does regulate gaming on Indian facilities. So if there's something happens to that facility, business is going to stop until they get it fixed. I want to stop right here and thank Paul and Dan and Wallace Engineering and the council. This has been a huge undertaking to get to this point. It's been a great deal of work to get the calculations done and get the agreement done, and people have really worked hard on this. And the tribe has, in good faith, always thought we'd have a 20-year time frame to collect that money. Disagree a little bit with the gentleman who wrote the letter saying, well, it only benefits the tribe, not the city. The city has a sewer line. The tribe built it and is paying for it now. So the city's benefit came first, the tribe benefit is coming next, but both parties have benefited hugely. That 500-plus acres that's in the city that is subject to this agreement, isn't that right, Paul?
583.
583, so almost 600 acres. That's a lot of development land. As a lawyer that does a lot of land use work, I can tell you that's a lot of development land. And I think it's perhaps not great, but fair to say that it's going to come very slowly. And the reason it's going to come slowly is we're on the very north end of the county. Number two, it's very expensive to develop in LaCentre. None of that property would develop without the sewer line. We also have to get lateral sewer lines to that line, and none of those exist now. Plus you have on the high end of the system development charges. That's just the plight of a smaller city that's growing and has to pay for these urban kinds of services. It's not just LaCentre's issue. It happens in small cities generally. I think those costs are going to make development happen pretty slowly out there. And the tribe really hopes to have the full 20-year period to collect, to be reimbursed for the $4.2 million, give or take, that it is spending to pay the city's municipal bonds. And I don't see a downside to that, because if development explodes and we get it all done in 10 years, we have to stop. I mean, we only get to collect it until we're paid off. So giving us the flexibility, the maximum flexibility state law allows to make sure we collect as much of that money as possible, I think is a good faith showing to the tribe. It's fair in the big picture here. And I actually think the tribe and the city's relationship is pretty good at this stage of the game. There's a lot of cooperation going on other things, and we'd like to see that continue. So we would encourage you to adopt the ordinance so that your code complies with state law and give us the maximum amount of flexibility we can have to recollect that money. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, entertain further discussion? Questions? Entertain a motion?
Mayor, I'll move to approve ordinance 2018-15, amending La Center Municipal Code 13.10.240 to extend the effective period for latecomer agreements from 15 to 20 years.
I second the motion.
All right. We will take,
And Mayor, one thing I'd point out, if we don't have, state law requires in order to pass by emergency clause, a majority plus one. So as I see that, we need 4 votes in favor of passage here. Otherwise, it can't be done by emergency clause.
Dan, clarification on the motion, does it also need to include reference to Jeremy's letter to the record?
Well, that's part of the record.
Public comment?
I think that's.
Paul covered part of it, I didn't know if
It is submitted as part of this.
but it came to us just before the meeting.
Yeah. And it's the second paragraph that addresses this code amendment. The rest addresses the latecomers agreement that comes later.
Right.
So his arguments were described, characterized, and it is part of the record of this.
Okay. Just wanted to be sure. All right. Any abstentions? Opposition? We'll get the roll call.
Yes.
Councilmember Stimmel?
Yes.
Councilmember Williams?
Yes.
Councilmember Stroman?
Yes.
Councilmember Sirkini?
Yes. Motion carries.
So as an emergency clause ordinance, it takes effect immediately.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the additional information, too. Lost my place here.
11A?
And we're on unfinished business, I believe.
Oh.
So, item number 8, unfinished business, is the I-5 Bridge Project letter to the governor that was discussed at our last meeting. And Councilmember Bob?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Yes, this was discussed at our last meeting. The proposal was made that if the city draft a letter as opposed to passing a resolution, Councilmember Cerveny and I worked together on the letter, and council members were given a copy of that draft just prior to the beginning of the meeting. Parts of the letter that you may like, I will say that Councilmember Cerveny wrote. If you don't like it, I'll take the responsibility for the parts that you don't like. But I think you will find that the letter it fulfills what we discussed at the last meeting. Specifically, we did not dwell on the topic of a new I-5 bridge. The letter does address the congestion issue which exists on both sides of the Columbia River, and the letter which is addressed to the governor calls for the governor to encourage a new conversation, encourage the conversation at all levels, encourage the conversation on both sides of the river. So I'd like to hear from the other council members, their comments on the draft that is before them.
Did you get away with not using the word bridge at all? Just scanning it real quick.
I don't know, did we? I didn't do a word search.
The issue is not the bridge. It's much greater than that, as we all know.
I thought you guys did a great job.
The letter basically tried to incorporate all of the comments that we heard from the citizens and the concerns that we know exist throughout North County, but yet still support the conversation beginning and getting to a solution because of the impact that it has on development of business and the economy of the state, and basically just focused on those topics. We just avoided the determination of our position on how you get to that solution, but we all know that a solution is needed. So, any comment from council?
I think you did a good job on this. I think it kind of sums it up. Doesn't mention bridge, because that isn't everything, so I think it's good. I mean, it is a mess. We know it's a mess.
We will do. All right.
It's going to get any better without some interaction between the states. So I think it's good.
All right. You already approved, I believe, proceeding with a letter to the governor, but we'll go ahead, now that you have had this before you, to approve this letter for signature. Motion?
I move to approve this letter, or approve the mayor to send this letter before us in draft to Governor Inslee.
Second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried. Thank you, everyone. All right, that takes us to new business, approval of latecomer agreement with the Cowlitz Indian Tribe. And once again, Consultant Paul Lewis is at the podium.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, council members, citizens. This is a close follow-on into the ordinance that you passed earlier. This is the actual latecomer agreement with the Cowlitz Indian Tribe. I want to expand that staff report inside.
Do we need to turn off the lights over on that side?
No, I think we're okay. This is the third time that we've come to you in a meeting setting. I think it's probably the fourth or more time that you've had some information provided to you on this topic. If you recall, back in May, we presented some preliminary information of how the latecomer would work, some initial information about what the fee might be. Then September 12th, at your meeting earlier this month, we provided an extended briefing. You received public comment. And then last, on the 24th, there was an open house where you all attended, and you also received information from staff, consultants, and questions from the public. This latecomer agreement was drafted using the framework provided for in the RCW state law, as well as in your own municipal code. I don't have a PowerPoint for you tonight. I'm going to walk you through the agreement briefly. And while this does not require a public hearing, I would encourage you to take public comment before your consideration tonight. So briefly, in terms of the framework, the RCW and your municipal code provide the opportunity for property owners that build and construct infrastructure, specifically water and sewer infrastructure, reuse sewer infrastructure, to be reimbursed from other property owners that benefit from that development through the latecomer agreement. And the fee that is collected on behalf of the property owner that builds the improvements is called the latecomer fee. Under a latecomer agreement, the benefiting property owners pay the fee if and when they develop their property. So if there is no development on your property, you do not pay the fee. It's only based on the connection to the infrastructure that you'll be using, and in this case, the sewer system. The term, as provided for earlier, allows state law and your municipal code now match up to 20 years. Property owner notice and appeal. So your municipal code has essentially two notices that are required, and both provide for appeal rights. I'll go into an extended presentation of the appeal rights in a minute, but essentially the first notice is based on a preliminary notice of the agreement That was sent out August 14th. And there's a final notice that'll be sent out after you approve the agreement. Essentially, property owners are given 20 days to appeal, and they can appeal on specific topics, and I'll get to those in a minute. Let's get down here. So under state law and the code, the Cowlitz Indian Tribe, the Cowlitz Tribal Gaming Authority, is eligible for reimbursement for the costs that they invested in the sewer pump station and trunk line. Just wanted to go through a little bit of the history here. It does go back a ways. The area was annexed back in 2011, and again, 583 acres. You've currently got it zoned for residential, mixed use, and your sub-area plan at the junction has industrial, residential, as well as commercial development included in it. The original design for this sewer line has been fairly stable. The tribe ended up building what was contemplated back in 2011 from an original design study by OTAC. As we mentioned earlier, in March 2016, an intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Cowlitz Indian Tribe included a provision that they would pay for the construction of this sewer line. And as I mentioned earlier, that language in that agreement actually contemplated a latecomer agreement or system development charge or other mechanism that the tribe would be reimbursed. So as Dan had mentioned earlier, this agreement fulfills your obligation under the 2016 intergovernmental agreement. Final design and engineering study done in August 2016. Olson Engineering completed that. The project financing was completed in July 2017. You actually approved your bond ordinance in January of 2017. Took a while to get all the agreements together for the bond financing, which closed in July. July 2017 is also the month where you passed your sub-area plan at the junction, providing for the kind of urban development that you wanted that would be require this sewer extension in order for it to happen. The construction happened between July 2017 and July 2018. Wallace Engineering completed a latecomer fee study beginning in March of 2018. You can see the latecomer fees there. I can get into the methodology in a minute. We went through that fairly extensively at the your September 12th meeting. But the way it works is that effectively property owners that develop and use more of the system pay a higher fee than property owners that are located closer to the wastewater treatment plant. So you can see the highest fee is in Basin A up at the junction, and the lowest fee is associated with Basin C and D nearest the bridge. As I mentioned, we made a notice to property owners. This is by certified mail. There are approximately 58 owners. There are 84 separate parcels in the benefiting area. Again, extended briefing on September 12th and the open house on the 24th. Just to hit the highlights of the agreement, if you're fairly well familiar with that, but essentially the city is obligated to collect the fee from property owners when they develop. The timing of that would be typically around when a building permit is issued, similar to other impact fees or system development charges. The city is obligated to, required by law, to provide that money back to the tribe within 60 days of when it receives it. We're providing in the agreement for annual reporting from the city to the tribe showing how much they've collected that year and what the remaining balance is on the latecomer agreement. So that would be an annual report. The tribe will be responsible for recording the agreement, so this will be recorded as an assessment against specific lots. And those lots are listed as an attachment exhibit to the agreement as well. And as the city attorney mentioned earlier, any amendment or expansion of the service area, either by annexation or on the unlikely event that the tribe were to hook up, the whole agreement would have to be renegotiated and the fees would be recalculated accordingly. Okay? I want to touch on the appeal provisions to make sure that you're clear on what those are. But essentially within 20 calendar days, this is for the final notice, so if you pass this latecomer agreement tonight, the city clerk will send out a notice to all the property owners. That final notice will have the final fees. It'll have a reference to the actual agreement, and it'll say if no appeal is received within 20 days, the agreement will be signed and will become effective. That notice will cover the following topics, but essentially it'll provide for, it'll include the appeal rights. So again, within 20 days, a property owner can submit an appeal. That appeal requires a $250 fee, has to be submitted to the city clerk, and it has to cover one of three areas: the cost, so they can object to the cost, the total cost that they're being asked to reimburse, in this case, the tribe. The cost methodology, essentially the allocation of those costs to the benefiting properties. The state law is fairly specific here. It has to be pro rata, so it has to have a methodology that allocates the costs associated with the benefit that's being received. And I think, as we've reviewed before, the Wallace methodology, I think, is a very robust methodology in terms of allocating those costs. And then benefit. The third area is benefit, whether or not their property actually benefits from the infrastructure being developed. If an appeal is received, the city clerk files that appeal, brings it to the city council's attention. The city council can accept the appeal and forward it to a hearing examiner for further consideration. And then the hearings examiner process runs its course. The recommendation from the hearing examiner comes back to the city council for further consideration, and you have the choice of accepting the recommendations, rejecting the recommendations as well. Okay? If no appeal is filed within that 20-day time frame, again, if you approve the agreement, the mayor is authorized to sign the agreement, and it'll become effective upon signing by both parties. So that's a quick run through of the agreement. I've got the agreement attached here. I've also got the maps. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them now. Again, our recommendation is that you approve a motion authorizing the mayor to sign the agreement. And again, there's no public hearing required, but we would encourage you to take public comment.
Any council questions?
Looks pretty straightforward. We've talked about this quite a bit.
Get to the map, so I can get that up. There we go. Okay.
Thank you. Public comments? Or none? All right. At 12 minutes till 8, we will adjourn the public comment section and entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to authorize the mayor to sign the Lakecomer agreement. Where's it? I'm at the wrong spot here, I think. Not here. Nope. Make a motion that we adopt the Latecomers agreement with the Cowles Indian Tribe as provided with Center Municipal Code, Chapter 13.10-240.
Second motion.
All right. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? And I as well. All right, so moved. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
I want to make one more statement. I want to thank the staff that
Definitely.
participated, Naomi and Tony and Matt and Tim Shell, and appreciate the tribe's involvement with Steve as well. Dan, the team effort worked really hard over the last several
Definitely,
weeks.
it's been a long process, and everyone has been very thorough and accommodating to all the questions that have come forward. So I appreciate that. It's helped us in our deliberations as well. Thank you. Next up is notice of intent for Holly annexation, and Naomi will be presenting once again.
Good evening again, Mayor Pro Tem, Council citizens. We have before us a intent to annex about 12.5 acres. It is south of Holly Park and the Public Works Shop. The one parcel is zoned currently for parks and open space, and the larger parcel will be zoned if annexed as LDR 7.5. What we have before us tonight is just asking for a motion with the intent for the applicant to proceed with the 60% petition, moving forward with the rest of the application materials, the SEPA documentation, and so forth. Is there any question? Actually, the proposed property is right here. And again, the shop, the mouse would work, is the where the buildings are up above. Oh, this mouse is not participating with me. But then, and then we come back down here, you can see the critical areas and the aerial with the stream corridor running east and west. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
In your memorandum, you mentioned that the property could be zoned for either low-density residential or park and open space. Do you have any kind of a feel from the Minihans as to which way you think it may go?
Well, so the parcel that's zoned for parks and open space is at top, again, if I could point, that would be great, but is that top portion right there next to Holly Park. Then the south parcel would be zoned LDR 7.5. There is a pre-application conference proposal coming forward at the same time. Right now, the proposal has a trail connecting Holly Park down south below the property, which follows along with our Parks and Open Space master plan, and then approximately 39 single-family low-density lots. Yep.
Is there a small creek that runs?
It is. That's what that kind of green swatch kind of swoops through there.
Right.
There is a creek that runs through there, and the trail alignment would kind of follow along that area as well.
It's a nice trail up and down on it.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
All right. Thank you, Naomi.
You're welcome.
Mayor, if I may, especially for the councilors who are, I think it's the first annexation for several of them.
It is.
And just to kind of give you a little primer on annexation, state law dictates how annexations happen. There are several methods. This is known as the 60% method, and it has two steps. This is the first step where they are required to provide consents from owners of 10% of the property, and it's basically a request to the city council to decide, just in general, is this something that the council wants to see in terms of, does it comport with your vision of the city boundaries? It's a totally open discretionary decision by you, and that's almost the evaluation here. If this was a totally bizarre location for the expansion of the city boundaries, that would be a problem, and it might be the basis for you to say, no, not ready to do it at this time. But in this GMA age where we have cities within urban growth areas, you can't annex land unless it's first within your urban growth area. So that's a fundamental requirement. So it meets that. And so there is some assumption that it does generally comport with the city council's view of what its city form should look like. Sometimes the problem is that there's no sewer or water or urban services and you are near a parcel, and so sometimes in those cases there would be it maybe meets the general vision of the city boundary, but when it comes time to annex, you would impose a requirement that no development until they prove up the existence of the urban services needed to serve it. So I would separate those two issues. At this point, it's just, if it feels good, approve it, and basically it's assigned to the proponents to go ahead to the next stage and get the 60%. In reality, they have 100% consent, so they would go to the next stage, which would be the formal application for annexation that would come before you in relatively short order, I would assume, like 10 minutes later. So that's how this two-step annexation process works.
Does that bring up more questions?
So if we annex that, is that giving us the property we need for the trail? How does that tie in there?
Yes, Councilmember Williams, it would. So it would be another trail segment part of the overall master plan.
Okay, so that's part of what we were looking for that trail?
Absolutely. In fact, if I recall correctly, you were on the committee when we were first talking about these, and this was one of the property owners we were originally, we were approaching about that trail.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Entertain a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move the council accept the notice of intent to annex and invite property owners to submit a petition to annex consistent with city procedures for annexation.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried. Thank you, everyone. That takes us to Proclamation Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. And get ready for the whereases, everyone. Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, whereas childhood cancer is the leading cause of death by disease in children. Approximately 42 children are diagnosed with cancer each day, and there are approximately 40,000 children on active treatment at any given time. And whereas there has been a 24% increase in the incidence of childhood cancer over the last 40 years, and whereas due to the lack of research programs dedicated to the treatment options appropriate for childhood cancer, the majority of children are treated with medications that were developed in the 1970s to 1980s for adults. And whereas too many children are affected by this deadly disease, and more must be done to raise awareness and find a cure. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Pro Tem Elizabeth Cerveny, by virtue of the authority vested in me as Mayor Pro Tem of the City of La Center, do hereby proclaim September as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, and encourage all citizens to make the fight against cancer better for its youngest victims by providing support and advocacy for children with cancer and their families. Adopted this 27th day of September 2018 by the Center City Council.
Make a motion to approve?
Second?
Second.
All right, a motion and a second to approve the proclamation of Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. And I would like to take a moment to apologize to the chief. If you have anything to bring before us that I neglected because you stepped out of the room. Okay. I didn't want to miss you. Don't want you to feel slighted there. You are an important part of the city. All right, we will entertain a motion for adjournment then.
I move we adjourn.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your patience. A heavy-duty agenda tonight.
I think I learned more about it.
I know.
Well, you'll be surprised if you have to learn.
I saw that.
All day.
You're welcome.
It's about